pleased to introduce Dr. Dick Bierman, Department of Psychology, University of Amsterdam, Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Dick, how do you do?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great.
Except for the heat, but anyway.
So you're a physicist, and you are studying consciousness. So you're at the junction of the two.
That's right. Basically, I started my career in physics, and then I became involved in psychology. Did some AI. Became interested in non-conscious and conscious processes. Did some work on intuition. So consciousness came closer and closer. It haunted me in some way, you know.
Okay.
And then I decided to combine the two, to combine my background in physics and my knowledge of consciousness, empirical studies of consciousness mostly. I'm doing experimental research in psychology, and so at the moment I'm mostly working to see if I can do some tests on what is known in the in theoretical physics, the measurement problem. Maybe you've heard about that. It's a crucial problem in quantum physics, and this problem seems to be related in two ways. Might be related in two ways with consciousness, and see that the difference between classical physics and quantum physics can be illustrated by imaging that a photon, a light particle, is going towards a half-transparent mirror. Mm-hmm. Now, in classical physics, it will either bounce off the mirror or go through it. In quantum physics, it does both simultaneously. And that's the whole difference. I mean, there's no more to it. However, at some point we are going to measure the photon, and we don't measure both. We measure either of the two states.
Either the one that bounced or the one that went through?
Well, no, that's
okay.
not that. Aha! See, there you relapse to classical thinking.
Okay, whoops.
No, we are going to measure the state function, which is a description of both simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And at the moment that we measure it, it collapses to one of the two. It decides either one. It is not the case that it decides at the mirror. It decides at the measurements. Right. And that's very mysterious. And of course, in quantum physics, many people have thought, well, what brings about this collapse, this mysterious collapse? Because
what brings them? Oh, what makes it collapse when we look at it?
Yeah, exactly. When we measure it.
And
okay.
How do we know that it's separate if whenever we look at it, it's together in one state or the other? How do we know that it ever separated?
Well, that has to do with Bell's theorem. That's quite complex, but basically Bell has proven that any theory that is so-called local realistic, that's his name for it, but it means that any theory which would say the photon has decided here, but we just don't know. Okay, we cannot know, but God knows. Right? Okay. Any theory that has that the premises would predict a specific outcome in a very specific experiment, and it didn't come out like that. And so we have to accept the fact that there is nothing more than a superposition of these two photons.
Meaning
there's no decision which is made here. It's made at the measurement.
Meaning if we put, so we use a half-transparent piece of glass or something, and so if we shoot a photon through it, and we put some fully opaque surface out here and over here, we get a mark on both. I mean, basically, it leaves a.
If it was a photographic plate, it would.
A photographic plate.
It would decide at the moment that it is measured. It would decide which plate it would make a black spot.
But why wouldn't? If we put a photographic plate on both sides,
then you would only get one black spot.
And that would be it will have bounced off every single time. I mean, sometimes we get a spot over here, and sometimes we get a spot over here.
Oh yes, yeah.
And that's okay.
So, but there is even an more interesting experiment when you have this half-transparent mirror. So, in fact, the photon goes half through and half, and this half reflected and goes half through, and you have two mirrors here that are opaque. Then you reflect them back to the same position. Then you get interference. So the photon interferes with itself.
So this proves that it's both bouncing and going
Exactly,
through.
exactly. That's what's happening. Now,
Otherwise,
you see, quantum physics is incomprehensible for a human mind, I think. But this is the best description we can give. But the mystery now is that what brings about this collapse? Because why don't we see or observe this double character, this yes and no simultaneously, going through and reflected simultaneously? And so that one solution is that it's ultimately the interaction with consciousness that brings about the collapse. That's the solution proposed by Stapp now. And I've tried to come up with an experiment to test that premise. And so that's an experiment that I'm currently doing at the University of Amsterdam. And basically I don't use these photons, but I use a radioactive decay, which is in the same way the particle is decayed and not decayed simultaneously in quantum mechanical description. So that's a quantum state. They call it superposition of possibilities, right? All the possibilities are there simultaneously, and therefore they call it superposition. Nice word. So what I do, so in radioactive decay, you have simultaneously a radioactive already decayed and not decayed. So both states are there. And so what we do is we take the radioactive source
like a piece of uranium or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And we measure the radioactive particles that are emitted with a Geiger-Müller counter. And then we transform it in a sound. But you see, since according to Stapp, there's not a criterion to decide where it will collapse. According to Stapp, everything is in superposition. Also, the Geiger-Müller counter is simultaneously hit by this particle and not hit. And the tone that's generated by the Geiger-Müller counter is simultaneously not there and it's there, right? It's only at the moment that somebody listens and experiences the tone that it finally collapses. And I have an experiment that I can test whether this is a true model.
And have you done the experiment?
No, not well. I've run pilot sessions, and I'm unable to decide yet whether this is a feasible model. So, but next year there will be Quantum Mind Conference here in Tucson.
Just to clarify, so basically then, it will accept for the moment that the collapse is occurring only when we look at it, and therefore we have to be affecting the collapse.
That's proposed by Stapp. And now this is basically the same thing, which is in the metaphor of the Schrödinger cat. Many people know about the Schrödinger cat metaphor, where basically the radioactive decay triggers some poison that's released in this box where the cat is. So, by the same token, the cat is simultaneously dead and alive. That's the proper description. That's the whether that is a state that we can imagine, that doesn't matter. It's the proper quantum mechanical description. And when you open the box, then the decision is made.
Why is it that the cat's dead every single time that we open the box, or would be?
Oh no, it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be.
No, because it can be that the emission wasn't there yet. Because it's a random process. It can be there, or so the radioactive source can emit a particle at any time. That's completely random. So we don't know.
So it may not have even emitted any particles at that moment yet.
No, that's exactly the point.
Okay.
So
Not whether, well, I thought the point was that it's emitting the particles, but we don't know, but the particles are not necessarily at the
Oh
poison.
yes,
They could be anywhere in the box, but not necessarily at the point of the poison.
No. Okay, well, no.
So I'm missing it.
Yeah, you're missing it. We have the reactive source. Okay, it emits particles. Let's say, on the average, once every hour.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
Okay.
But it might have emitted it right away after a second. It can also last 10 hours. The proper quantum mechanical description is that it is a superposition of having emitted a particle and having not emitted a particle. That's the proper description. Now, since we link the particle to a particle detector and then to the poison, and the poison will be released in the box, the proper description of the box is also a superposition of two states, namely poison released and not released simultaneously.
All right.
And therefore cat dead and cat living simultaneously. If you open it, the decision is made. Might be that he's alive because there hasn't been a particle emitted. Or
Right, gotcha.
See?
Okay.
So that's the model that there are not many people that like that model, but it's a famous metaphor. Everybody knows it. So there is still Henry Stepp who supports this model, and therefore it's worthwhile testing. Now the way that I test it is not by using poison,
Poor
which
cats,
is,
you know.
but by using a sound. The sound is simultaneously there and not there, and what I do is I delay the sound. Okay, so the sound is there, and then I have a delayed sound. So the sound is there and not there. I delay this very weird state, and it's now delayed, not there, and there simultaneously, and I feed it into the ears of an observer.
Okay.
Okay. Now this observer will hear once in a while beep, beep, and we measure it, the observer's EEG, the brain responds to these beeps. Now, somewhere the interaction with consciousness arises, but in the early stages of processing, there's still no consciousness of the beep. So let's say the first 200 milliseconds, there's no conscious perception yet. So at that stage, the brain is interacting with a so-called superposition, with this weird quantum states, and then it collapses. Okay? That's the model.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, what we do is, before this delay line, we have another observer. Sometimes, and then switch. So sometimes, in let's say half of the cases, we first feed this audio beep to the first observer, and sometimes we don't feed it to the first observer. If we feed it to the first observer 1 second earlier, the state is collapsed. So now the second observer will receive a singular state, a non-collapse, a collapsed state, because somebody else has, let's say, peeked into it.
Okay.
Okay, and so now what we hope to see is in the second observer's EEG a different brain potential when this one is looking. When the first one is looking earlier, the state has been changed, and therefore its brain potential might be different.
Meaning that the first observer is somehow communicating with the second observer, or
No,
their brains are communicating?
not really. Basically, what the first observer is doing is collapsing the wave function, and therefore the second observer is observing a different physical state. Because it's later, there's this delay line.
Right, so basically you're saying the quantum state has been collapsed, therefore the second observer should be aware of the collapse at that point.
Not really aware, but his brain response should be different. So we are looking at in the non-conscious processing phase of the second observer.
I got you. The part that is basically has all the infinite possibilities at any given moment. The superimposition of the quantum state that you're talking about.
No, I don't think I can get it.
Well, you said that basically the possibility hits the brain before consciousness says beep. I hear a beep.
Yes. So okay.
The potential of a beep or not, our brain is aware of the different potentials of a beep or not. Before our consciousness is, our brain is, right? No. I thought you said that.
Did you study quantum physics?
No.
Obviously this is a very good example of how difficult it is to explain quantum physics.
I know about as much as the audience, I think.
Okay, well then it's good, a good
That's
exercise.
Why I'm here. So I'm representing the other.
Okay, let's try it again then. But you must have been subject already to all these other people.
Yeah, but I mean, still, if I'm trying to take the explanation and try to reflect what the audience is interpreting.
Oh, okay,
See
okay,
if,
okay.
See if it's.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So okay, no, well.
I mean, basically, right now, I'm a potential different quantum states. I may understand you or I may not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a good
But I
description.
can't tell you because I have to know.
Suppose I maybe that's too difficult with these with the tone and so on and the delay line. Let me take this. Maybe I can explain it with this hurting a cat.
Okay.
Rather than opening the box. Okay. Suppose we have a video camera in front of this box with the cat.
Okay.
And we feed this image. So every minute we feed one frame to. You understand one frame?
Yes.
One frame. Yeah. Therefore, I use it.
You found a metaphor. I understand. Okay.
Okay. We feed one frame to an observer.
Sure.
Very short.
Yes.
It's just one frame.
Mm-hmm.
His brain will respond.
Mm-hmm.
If he is the first observer, what actually is happening according to STAP is that he is also collapsing this waveform, collapsing this cat, is choosing between the two possibilities because he's the first observer. He's the first one. His conscious experience collapses the wave function, so he observes this cat, but also the information that comes to him is in superposition because he's the first observer, right? It's both options that are going to him.
Right. Okay.
Right. Now we do a trick. We send the frame first to another observer and then send it to the main character in our observation, right?
All right.
And then again he is observing. He doesn't notice any difference consciously. He either sees a dead cat or we need many cats though.
Right. Well, they each have 9 lives, so you've got.
In this experiment. So okay, he sees either a dead or a live cat, but in his early processing in the brain, the interaction is with a superposition.
That's what I was saying. I mean, his brain.
But not when the other has first peeked to the frame.
That's the theory that you have either.
And that's the theory that I want to test.
I gotcha. But you haven't done that yet, that experiment.
No, well, certainly not with cats.
No, but okay. Okay, so that's the experiment you want to do.
Yeah.
And
then we look at the brain signals of this second observer as a function of the first observer looking or not looking. Mm-hmm. And now you said, that was the point we were just 5 minutes ago.
Right.
And then you said, so there is a kind of a...
No. That actually jumped to another track there. What I was, because I didn't pick up that you then send the same image, that single frame, for instance, a video, to the other person.
Okay, okay.
I thought you wanted to see if that second person, without sending them anything,
No. The same frame goes first to the first observer, then to the second observer, and and if the first observer has observed it, then the frame is collapsed, so to speak, and so there is another situation in quantum physical terms according to this theory.
But isn't the second observer, isn't the first observer now part of the possible? I mean, doesn't he become the cat?
Well, that's that.
Because
now
not,
this problem, that's a very good question, basically. This problem is known as Wigner's friend. Wigner, who was the first one who played with this possibilities, he came with this idea of the first one becoming part of the quantum system, basically, and then a second observer is collapsing the first observer and the cat, and so on. You get infinite regress,
right? And
basically that leads to nowhere,
right?
But that only shows how desperate people are to solve this measurement problem, I think. But anyway, there's no. I think that STEP has solved that problem. I don't know how, basically, but
Has solved the what?
this weakness friend problem that you can also say that the first observer becomes a
Becomes the
superposition,
cat,
kind of, yeah, becomes an affiliate of the cat.
right. Because the second person doesn't know what the first person saw,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
So you're really saying infinite regress is the word.
exactly.
So,
yeah.
but that's been proven to not be the case now, or
No, I wouldn't say so. I think that see, here's a difference between theory and experiment. I accept this theoretical proposal, and I want to test it. It's very difficult to test it, but anyway, I want to test it, and whether if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and then probably the proposal is not right. But I don't.
Okay.
I have no logical arguments to say that it's right or not right.
Sure, it's a theory at this
I'm
point.
not a theoretical physicist.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So now this is one thing that I'm doing, and it relates to something that Stuart wouldn't like at all, because this is not Stuart's model. It's not Penrose's model, right?
Okay.
And theoretical physicists and theoretical people are always inclined only to think about their own model and not to. But I'm not theoretically inclined. I'm a data-driven person, so whatever comes out of the experiment is okay with me. So the second thing that I'm testing is, not really testing, but anyway, trying to find support for Penrose and Hamerof's model. Now, not really for Penrose's model. I think more for Hamerof's thinking that quantum processes in the brain might play a role. And I'm talking about quantum computation. So for quantum computation, you need not only superposition, which are the cat and the dead and the alive cat, but you also need something which is rather pure, quantum states, so to speak. It's called coherent states. Doesn't matter how that is exactly defined, but the requirements are really very high, and I would say 99.999% of all physicists think it's completely impossible to have such states in the brain because of it being too hot and too wet and too large and whatever. Because quantum physics has originally been designed or developed for the micro world. It's gradually now creeping into the macro world, but it's still mostly applicable in the micro world. And the cold world, 0 degrees, basically. There it works, but not in the hot world. Then we are all kind of classical objects. So that's what all physicists say. Okay, what Stuart Hameroff claims is that biology has found a way to keep these precious quantum states from being harmed by the environment. Decoherence is the name for it. So, and he proposes a lot of kind of neurological and physiological models, like the microtubulin, that does this miracle, so to speak. I don't know. I have seen calculations by his opponents that say no, it's impossible. These quantum states they last 10 to the minus 14 seconds, and it's very short. Not long enough to do any useful quantum computation with it. On the other hand, Jack Tuschinski and Scott Hagen and Hameroff have redone the calculations and get something like 100 milliseconds. Now there is an enormous discrepancy between these two numbers, and that's why I don't trust them both, basically. These are theoretical people, they make assumptions, and if you are doing calculations on the brain, you have to make very many assumptions, of course. It's a very complicated system. So what I said is, can we measure these decoherence times, how long a nice quantum state remains stable in the brain, rather than writing nasty articles in theoretical journals and accusing each other of being stupid. We better ask nature, whether that's a possibility.
Okay.
And so a research scientist that I met at Interval Corporation a few years ago, Pierre Saint-Hilaire, and I designed an experiment which is called the photon echo experiment, which is basically a standard technique in quantum physics to measure the duration of a pure quantum state.
Here's a quick question I have for you. If right now you're saying you're taking one source of radioactivity in the box that has the effect, right? But when you start talking about people, let's say, and you're firing, you're saying, okay, I'm gonna set this experiment up where they're the cat, but they have the ability and essentially to generate, or Stuart would say we have the. It's like if you have a switch and I have a switch, and they're both on or off, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a switch. Right now, if I'm sitting here, and if we hit the switch at the same time on, the light bulb goes on.
Mm-hmm.
If I hit it on, you hit it off, the light bulb doesn't do anything. If we both hit off, it doesn't do anything. Right now, I don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what I'm going to do, right? If you know the gun fires and we both flip our switch, then we know what the other person was thinking, right? I mean, basically, what I'm saying is you're taking a piece of radioactive material, and you're generating something out of it, and saying that all we're doing is sitting here receiving it, and what the quantum physicists of consciousness would say is that no, we're actually sending a wave from the other direction, or a set of possibilities from the other direction, so that it's not just we're receiving something, we're sending something as well, and then where they meet in the middle, it's, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's confused. I'm confused, obviously, but the idea being that if
let's try to get it right then.
I'm saying if we have quantum computation happening in our brain right now, then we're creating this. We're also creating a quantum. We're a piece of radioactive material then.
See, the confusion. I think that I know where the confusion arises. I'm talking about two separate experiments which test two separate theories.
Right.
The first theory is the theory by step that consciousness collapses the wave function.
But does it do it by catching a ball in a mitt, or does it do it by throwing the ball at the ball?
It's a passive proposal. So the consciousness is because consciousness is non-physical according to Stab. It's something which doesn't belong to the physical world. We know we have it in somewhere. It's generated by the brain, but it's something non-physical. And the interaction of the physical world, the quantum world, with consciousness, results in collapsing of the wave function. That's one model. Whereas the other model is this Hameroff-Penrose model, where consciousness is generated by the collapse. It's completely different. It's nearly orthogonal, opposed to each other. That's why Stuart doesn't want to hear about that in the other one. But I think both are viable. Both are viable accounts of the relation between quantum physics and consciousness. See, I'm interested in the relation between quantum physics and consciousness. One is Stuart Hameroff and Penrose, and the other one is Stab. And they are completely, they have nothing to do with each other. And the confusion comes if you are going to mix them, then I can't even follow you anymore.
Well, I'm just saying that right now just the idea that we're sitting here passively receiving, maybe not photons, for instance, and we're just catching them, in a net, and we're not actually generating any. Again, you know what I mean? Like, even if it's, we might not see it's like I'm just using obviously a classical example. It's the only metaphor that I can think of. But if someone throws a baseball at us, it's like saying we're sitting there holding the bat, and the ball either bounces off our bat or not. But we're actually swinging the bat. I mean, we're not just sitting there letting the ball hit the bat. We're generating motion as well. We're not just a passive recipient of the radioactive particle.
No,
we're sitting there.
Now you're talking about our position in life. But I was talking about an experiment where I fixate the subject and he
But
has to sit there
But as
and
I'm
wait.
saying, is that experiment? I mean, does that experiment reflect reality? Because if we are indeed generating our own quantum field, then you know what I mean?
Well, I wouldn't say that we are generating our quantum field.
Our own quantum action.
That's not the point. In that experiment, I just want to test this idea that consciousness does collapse the wave function. That's the only thing.
Okay.
I don't want to have any. It doesn't go further. It's spectacular enough. I mean, if we can prove that this is the case, I mean that will really shock the world, I think.
But
so why would you even? I can understand that you say, okay, I don't like the experiment because you
no, I'm
represent
not saying I don't. I'm saying that right now you just gave me a string of metaphors. You're saying the radioactive material generates these radioactive particles or not, and then you've got a cascading effect where it hits the poison bottle and or the trigger, which then hits the poison bottle, which then hits the cat, which then hits the observer. Let's throw the box out of the experiment for a minute. But so we're 5 generations behind. But you've just basically then, by the time it hits the observer, me opening the box is a classical effect. But you've just gone from the quantum effect to a classical effect. Where did the one morph into the other? I mean, by the time I open the box, that's a classical effect, right? Versus what
it's a
you know what I'm saying?
It's a classical action.
It's a classical which.
So at some point you become, you become conscious of what's in there, and at that moment, at the moment that your consciousness kind of changes due to the quantum sequence, so to speak.
Right, but that has turned into classical by the time
that
the poison is released. That's a classical action, right?
No. It's all quantum. See, in Stapp's model, and this is an argument that's already very old. Wigner and von Neumann have argued exactly the same. There's nothing in physics that can tell us where this collapse occurs. And they are right.
Where on the chain?
Where in the chain? There is no criterion where the collapse occurs. See, that's different from the decoherence problem because decoherence is just that the quantum states becomes more and more fuzzy.
Okay.
But the superposition does remain. We have here 2 possibilities, namely the cat is dead or alive. And there's nowhere in this whole process where you can say, oh, well, physics tells us now it should decide. It doesn't decide. That's the mystery. That's the measurement problem. And therefore, you need some external agency, something external of physics, nearly, to be introduced to describe the world, because we experience a non-collapse world. A collapsed world.
Right.
Since we experience a collapsed world, something has happened.
Predictability. The fact that predictability is arising from non-predictability means that...
Exactly. It's the classical world. Penrose proposes not that... he says, no, it's not consciousness that collapses the wave function. It's quantum gravity. Now, that's a very... nobody really swallows that proposal. So here I am testing 2 very unpopular models, right? Extremely unpopular models. Penrose says it's quantum gravity and it has something to do with space-time structure, and I even don't understand it. But anyway, he says it.
Okay.
So he says it's kind of when these 2 options are too far apart in some way, are too heavy, then they have to decide. Otherwise, the disturbance is too large. When they grow apart too far, they have to decide, and then the collapse occurs. So he thinks that indeed, somewhere in this physical chain, without any interaction of consciousness, it collapses. And then he says, this collapse is consciousness, produces consciousness in the brain.
By creating now, so that's the moment where we pass from the quantum
to the classical in the brain. And that's
the threshold. where that occurs. And we are definitely in, he's basically saying we're way out here in the classical field.
Yeah, well, what he's saying is what we have in the brain is we have a quantum state building up, and so there's a position of different possibilities. It's also doing its quantum computation. That's very advantageous. Mm-hmm. But you know, you cannot have a too big quantum states where all these where there's a certain kind of becomes heavy. That's how, because more and more neurons become in superposition, becomes very heavy, and then it has to collapse, and that's consciousness. Well,
Okay. So
there was a speaker this morning who said, when he finished his talk, it was Brooks, the guy from the MIT AI lab, right, the director there is, and he had this last draft. What has this to do with consciousness? Was the question, and he said,
I have no idea.
I have no idea, but I don't think that any of you have an idea.
So we're basically just, it's all kitchen physics then, basically, or kitchen quantum physics.
Yeah, I think that's. So we have to. Well, that's my position. I listen to the people that put forward theories, and then I try to come up with an experiment to test it. So that was, I was talking before the tape was changed. I was talking about this experiment on the photon echo experiment. Because in Penrose and Hameroff thinking, so what's happening in the brain? Building up of a quantum state, collapse. Building up of a quantum state, collapse. These collapses are then, well, thoughts or moments of consciousness.
Moments, okay.
Moments of consciousness, right, whatever that may be. That's also, that's
okay,
kind of, I experience more or less a continuum, but anyway, they think this is kind of frames, so to speak.
Like a video camera.
Yeah. So that's their proposal. No way. General physics says no way because it's too hot. You cannot have, let's say, 25 milliseconds in quantum state in the brain. It's impossible. That's what I say. And then Stuart comes in and says, no, there are structures that, you know, they are mysterious, but they can do this stuff, and they screen off the decoherence effects of the environment. And the difficult word is environmental decoherence. Okay, that's the word. You will hear.
Like Nancy was saying, basically that's where the microtubules come in.
Yes, exactly. That's the structure.
There's a cascade of classical physics as the things, you know, chemical and electromagnetic cascade effect. You know, baseball hits you in the arm, and then the pain travels up and all into your brain, into your neuron. And then at some point, it reaches the little microtubule, but at that moment, it lets go of the microtubule, and the microtubule has a moment where it's in this quantum state,
exactly,
where then it can,
and it builds up this larger and larger quantum states, and then it collapses, and it's a moment of consciousness.
So a bunch of microtubules basically make a decision on how to react or what to think or what to feel.
Sure.
And then
that's the idea.
And then they vote and
that's the idea.
Okay.
But the objection is it is impossible because it's too hot.
Because of the temperature.
It's too hot. So Hameroff says no. We do the calculations. When we do the calculations, not too hot. It lasts longer time. Others do the calculations, and it's too hot. It only lasts 10 to the minus 14 seconds. I say, okay, let's measure it. That's the idea. And the way to measure this is using a well-accepted method in quantum physics, the photon echo, where you shoot a laser beam, pulse of a laser beam onto the system under investigation. You bring it in a quantum state, then you shoot a second pulse after, let's say, a microsecond or a very short time.
Right.
If it's still in the quantum state, it will reflect or it will emit the same photons that you have shot on at the quantum state. And thereby you can measure the time that it stays in the quantum state, because you vary, let's say, the time between the two pulses. Okay, so now we have to do this in a living brain, because very probably if this works, if what Hameroff proposes, it's probably a property or it's something that is acquired by living tissue and by living brain. and then and you won't find it in that microtubule. Okay, so the solution here is that we have one part where we can shoot photons in the living brain, and that's the retina. The retina is an extension of the brain.
Sure.
So there are rhodopsin molecules in the retina, and you can kind of shoot these laser beams or the pulse on the retina, and then measure how long the retina is in superposition or in a pure quantum state, in a coherent quantum state.
Does the retina have microtubules within it?
Everything has microtubules.
Everything, but I mean, does it have the right kind? Because there's like 20 different.
Yes, it has the right kind.
That's the right kind.
Like more or less like what you find in neurons. Yeah.
Okay, so you can actually.
It's an extension of the brain.
So you should be able to take just, you don't even need a human being. You just need,
Well, we start with that cow's eyes, and then we gradually move upwards, because it's of course not.
You don't have anybody to tell you what's happening.
No, we don't, and we don't need a first person perspective.
Right. All you would need to know is if
the photons coming back. If the photons coming back, then apparently the state is still alive. So what we are going.
Microtubules are still thinking.
And they're still, yeah. Well, they are still in quantum state.
There's still a quantum computation going on inside.
Exactly. The solution here is that we have one part where we can shoot photons in the living brain, and that's the retina. The retina is an extension of the brain.
Sure.
So there are rhodopsin molecules in the retina, and you can kind of shoot these laser beams or the pulse on the retina, and then measure how long the retina is in superposition or in a pure quantum state, in a coherent quantum state.
Does the retina have microtubules within it?
Everything has microtubules.
Everything, but I mean, does it have the right kind? Because there's like 20 different.
Yes, it has the right kind.
That's the right kind.
Like more or less like what you find in neurons. Yeah.
Okay, so you can actually.
It's an extension of the brain.
So you should be able to take just, you don't even need a human being. You just need,
Well, we start with that cow's eyes, and then we gradually move upwards, because it's of course not.
You don't have anybody to tell you what's happening.
No, we don't, and we don't need a first person perspective.
Right. All you would need to know is if
the photons coming back. If the photons coming back, then apparently the state is still alive. So what we are going.
Microtubules are still thinking.
And they're still, yeah. Well, they are still in quantum state.
There's still a quantum computation going on inside.
Yeah, exactly. And personally, I think that lots of computation at least is going on at the retina. More and more results from the retina indicate that lots of calculations are going on already at the retina, which is, if you think about it, quite logical, because it's part of your brain.
Okay. All right. Well.
So.
Fascinating. And you haven't done that experiment yet, but you're considering doing that.
Well, no, we are setting it up.
You're setting it up.
This will happen in September, I think.
What's going to, just to get into that experiment a little bit, how will it actually work? So the photons are firing into, you just basically.
We need a laser.
You can take some of the cells out of it from an eyeball, put them in put them in the line.
Well, that's, it has been proposed to put, you can have living retina cells in a petri dish. You can scrape them off and
keep them alive.
But I think, well, my preference is just to use human beings.
An alive person. Yeah. But then you're going to expect them to make a reaction based on.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so how do you measure whether the photons? What should happen if a photon?
The photons should, you shoot them in the eye. They should come back. After you shoot a pulse, and then after, let's say, a millisecond or a microsecond, because we don't think but after a microsecond, 1/1,000,000th of a second, you shoot another pulse, and you look whether the photons come back.
Which one, the first or the second one?
Photons. We don't label them of the same frequency are coming back.
Okay, well, I mean, you know that, the pulse,
the same frequency.
The pulse is okay, the same frequency is coming back.
Yeah.
Because which would mean that the microtubule is actually holding that frequency for us.
No, that's not quite. But the total system being in a quantum superposition and in a coherent state has absorbed that photon and will re-emit the photon when it precesses back into the ground state. That's basically the underlying process. So if it's still there, if it still has this kind of excited state, then it will re-emit a photon when a new photon tries to. It's like there's a little possibility that a photon comes into this molecule, and it will catch the molecule, so to speak, and it's like if it still has this state where the molecule is in this excited state, then if another photon comes and it sees as if it were go away, and it shoots the other one out, so to speak, and it comes back.
Otherwise, it'll absorb both.
It will absorb. Well, the other one is already the effect of the other one is gone, and it can absorb the second one, and you won't see
so it'll
echo.
just keep. It'll. You won't get. Okay. So either
If the quantum state is gone, you won't get an echo.
All right. Because it'll just keep absorbing those photons and absorbing them.
Yeah.
And if it's still there, it'll basically.
And so you know the decoherence time that for these molecules then. That if you see both of these experiments that I'm preparing, if nothing comes out of it, it teaches me nothing, because I'm quite sure that both theoretical approaches will tell me, okay, but you didn't do it right, or this is that and this and that. There's always an escape. But if something comes out, it's a support for a theoretical framework. So if I find that quantum states can live for a microsecond in the retina, then that will blow away techmark, let's say the people that say it's impossible. Okay. And that's indirect support for the idea that quantum processes play an important role in the brain. It doesn't say whether the Penrose-Hameroff model is quite correct, but at least it gives them kind of a defense against all those people that say it's impossible.
Right. Because otherwise, rewind a little bit. If otherwise the photon, if there's not something, basically what's happening then is it slows the photon hits that microtubule, right?
It's not the microtubule is inside them.
Or it hits and
the molecule. It hits the molecule. It hits
the
rhodopsin molecule. That's the most frequent molecule at the retina. Okay, that's rhodopsin.
Okay.
It hits that molecule. It brings it into some quantum state. If the state is still alive, and thereby internally it might create all these microtubulins, or the microtubulins are there. That's the assumption to keep it decohere due to this thermal noisy environment. So the microtubules do their job, their mysterious job to keep that state alive.
Okay. And
then the second photon comes, and then we will have an emission of the first one, so to speak.
So it's almost like the photons coming through, and if this thing is actually able to maintain a quantum field or a quantum state, it's almost like eventually what will happen, the photon will eventually pass through it. So it's almost like it's hitting it, but it's absorbing through, and if there's something still active there, it'll kind of slow the, meaning it's not just
you cannot slow down a photon. But anyway, it will be.
Maybe not slow down, but somehow. I mean, how is it?
I don't know. I have not a precise idea about how. Let's say you have this excited molecule, and then the second photon arrives. What happens with the second photon? I don't know. Maybe these photons are interchangeable. But anyway, the idea is that when the second photon arrives and the first one is still there in some way.
That's what I'm saying.
Then
you said it's emitted. Be there though, or is it?
Well, there is an interchangeability between kind of energy and photons. So it's basically transferred into some specific energy.
Is still there. The frequency of
it corresponds to a precise frequency.
Okay. So the photon comes in, and basically it's able to maintain that frequency then for a moment.
Yes.
Which is the same difference as basically saying it's not whether the photon went through or not.
That's where the coherence is. Yeah, it's exactly the same frequencies that is emitted.
And if it's exact same frequency, then if another thing of that frequency hits it, it'll bounce.
Yes.
So if you take two things with identical frequencies, they
either bounce or
a
re-emit. It's more a re-emission, but anyway.
So okay. Versus passing through each other. If they're different frequencies, they'll pass through each other.
Oh yeah. If the situation of the rhodopsin molecule has changed in the sense that it has interacted with the environment and the exact energetic states are changed a little bit, then the second photon won't do anything, or will be absorbed again. But it doesn't result in a re-emission.
What happens when a photon hits a mirror and bounces off it, though?
Well, that's the big problem. Here is the big problem. We have a mirror here. That's the cornea. So we have a lot of noise due to reflections, and we have to separate. You know, all these reflections are normal reflections.
Okay.
Now that's not bad for the first pulse, because we don't. We know. Okay, we send the pulse, and so we shut. We have a very fast shutter. But the second pulse, of course, there is reflections from the cornea, I think it's called, and then and also we have the emission, we hope, from the retina, and we have to separate these two signals, and that's the big.
Well, they're different frequencies, though, right?
No, it's the same.
They're identical.
Yeah.
All right. How will you know then if it's that? I mean, how do you know it's just not something that's, for metaphorically, just a piece of glass sitting in there? I mean, that the microtubule is just acting like a piece of glass versus any kind of I mean, it's just bouncing it off the same way a mirror would bounce it off. How do you know when if it's bouncing, if it's coming back to you?
Yeah.
How do you know whether what occurred there?
You mean the retina being because
or the microtubule? How do you know that it hit something that did something with it versus just bounce it back like a mirror would, which is completely? Does the frequency change? That's what I'm saying.
Because you have two pulses. The first one shouldn't have an echo, and the second one should have an echo. So by measuring the difference between the reflective. The first one has a reflection.
Off a mirror, you'd get two echoes.
Okay.
If you put two pulses, you get two
no, you
pulses back.
Yes, okay. Exactly.
Okay, so you shoot two pulses of photons at a mirror, you get two pulses back. You shoot them at a theoretical quantum
state. The first one must have a smaller reflection.
You're only going to get one back.
Yeah, but we have this reflection from the cornea also.
That'll mix in with it.
Yeah, and basically the reflections, let's say what you get back the first time and what you get back the second time should be more than what you get back the first time.
If the
quantum state
thing happening there, you get
so
more than you send.
And that's really at the boundary of what our equipment can do. I mean, it's really stretching the limits. I think.
I'm pleased to introduce Paavo Pylkka, Associate Professor of Philosophy from the University of Skövde, Sweden. Paavo, you are originally a physicist, and now you are moving into philosophy. Is that sort of a result of a limitation in physics for you, or did you just feel that there was that the two needed to be coupled for some reason?
Right. Okay. So I never quite became a physicist. So I studied roughly up to bachelor's level.
Okay.
And I studied also some neuroscience. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go broader was also because I was interested in questions like the relationship between mind and matter. And in standard physics, it's quite hard to pursue that kind of idea.
So philosophy, obviously, that sort of was the precursor to science as we know it, and there are probably a whole lot of clues in thousands of years of philosophers' thinking that are applicable to where physics is trying to go now, which is into the realm of consciousness, and where ostensibly you are as well. What are the primary concepts, and who are the influences for you at this point? And I mean, just start talking. I know David Bohm has been somewhat influential, and if you'd like to elaborate a little on that, and
okay,
in what ways, I guess.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's clear that I was pretty early on. I was around 20 when I read Bohm's book Wholeness and the Implicate Order.
What's it?
Wholeness and the Implicate Order.
Okay.
When it came out in London, and I got to know him at the same time also, and so interacted over the years and collaborated also to some extent until he died then in 1992. And there, so that he was of course a very strong influence. And I think if one looks at Bohm's work, I mean, in many ways it differs from sort of mainstream physics. One of the features was that he was always interested in giving us a physical picture of reality, whereas in contemporary physics it's often very mathematical and it's not very intuitive. So that was one of the features, which is perhaps more philosophical aspect of Bohm's work. And so he's today quite well known for sort of developing what is known as an ontological interpretation of quantum theory, which is trying to tell us what reality is like at the quantum level beyond the phenomena. And he invented the theory, published it in 1952, and it was in the cover of Scientific American in 1994. So it took 42 years to get, in this sense, this kind of acknowledgement. And today it's one of those major theories. So in that sense, that's one aspect. More philosophical interest in physics is really to ask what's the real world like at the more fundamental level. And the other part of Bohm's work was to not just to do a specific theory of physics and try to seek for a specific law, such as the laws of quantum physics, but also to try to find a more general framework, or something he called the order of nature, which was then another feature of his work. This could also be called metaphysics in philosophy, where one is concerned about the nature of reality in some very general terms. And there, physicists, it's somewhat similar when people perhaps know in physicists talk about harmony or beauty or symmetry, those kinds of principles that are not really yet specific laws in a specific area, but they're the deep general background of physics. So one could say that was another aspect of Bohm's work. And then yet another was to try to understand consciousness as part of this physical reality, and in particular our experience of movement. And so that's, if you like, the background. And in my case, then I also studied some neuroscience and also cognitive science, artificial intelligence, those kind of fields, as well as then just as I moved into the philosophy, then one studies all the current philosophical theories about consciousness, and so that's sort of roughly the background of influences.
So starting from there then and burrowing in here, what are the primary
if you had to say that at this moment there are a couple of principles that seem to hold a lot of promise, I guess, what would they be?
Well, I think the one idea is the idea of implicate order, and this was invented by Bierman, and the basic idea is there that we are used in our everyday experience. We are used to seeing the physical world as a mechanistic world. Things are outside of each other, and they are rather independent of other things, and they interact mechanically, either direct contact or then forces that diminish with distance. But according to Bohm, what this quantum theory especially points to is there an other deeper order in nature, which is more like an order of wholeness, where and so in quantum mechanics, for example, there's the well-known non-locality where spatially separated systems can still be connected in some way that appears to be faster than the speed of light. And there's also the well-known wave-particle duality, where a part such as an electron is not just a particle, but it also has a radically new wave-like effect. And this wave doesn't live in this our ordinary three-dimensional space. It lives in something called the configuration space, which for two particles is already a six-dimensional space. So it's again another kind of concept of implicate order that one could use to describe this kind of entity. And also it's quite well known that in quantum mechanics movement is discontinuous. So everybody may have heard about quantum jumps. So in these early models, especially a particle such as an electron could be at a certain point and then appear at another point without going in between. And if we look at bubble chamber results, we don't see an absolutely continuous trajectory that's left into the bubble chamber. We actually see points or bubbles organized in a line, which again suggests some kind of almost like indivisible chunks from A to B, which is another perhaps more difficult kind of wholeness. But what Bohm was trying to do with his concept of this implicate order was to capture these radically new holistic features of quantum theory.
When you said entity, what did you mean by that?
Well, entity could be something like a particle.
I thought you were talking about this more fundamental layer as an entity or something.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Did I miss that? Or
well, it could be the. I think in physics then the physicist would refer to the vacuum state as some kind of ground, out of which all the particles that we see are they're in some way enfolded to this vacuum state. And then so it's the vacuum state is sort of that's a little bit beyond what I've been sort of studying. So, but I think that certainly you could look at that as some kind of a ground of the matter that we observe.
When you say entity, do you think it's alive? Do you think there's some sort of consciousness to it, or is it pretty much just like a big bowl of soup that we sort of come out of, or something? I mean, or that that reconfigures itself into particles depending on where your position is relative to it. Here's an example of what I guess I'm asking. If we're basically saying that you're going into these more fundamental levels from which reality as we know it derives, right? But that fundamental level, even if we get to that fundamental level, discover it, won't there always be a fundamental level then beyond that? I mean, the word fundamental is a description of something that is, I suppose, deeper than where we're at. And no matter where we go, there'll always be something more fundamental then, correct? I mean, given infinity.
No, I would that's the way I would think about it, yeah.
So where do we go from here? I mean, what direction are you heading? I mean, what are you focusing on right now to try to discover this fundamental level, or to achieve it, or be able to explain, describe, observe, or get to it?
Of course, as a philosopher, then I have very limited ability or capacity to actually study further those structures. So what I have to rely on is into the physicists like Bohm and others who express the meaning of those rather difficult theories in a sort of language that the mortals can understand, like myself, and so. But then I think my role is partly to try to reformulate those ideas and try to perhaps present them in a kind of way that philosophers try to present theories, and so that's one aspect, is just to give some thought to the results that the physicists have been producing, but it's in some sense that is a hobby for me, because because I haven't got really the training to go deeply into it. That would involve some sophisticated algebras and mathematical formalism that I cannot really handle that word. Now, but still, what I would like to see and understand the sort of current picture that we would get, let's say, from the implicate order point of view. It involves also an idea, something known as pre-space, which is a level from which we also could derive our own space-time. Physicists like Wheeler have been also proposing this long ago. That's something that would seem to be useful if one wants to combine general relativity and quantum theory together. Now, but then if we think of the question of consciousness and mind in a physical universe, we could say that in current natural science, it's pretty mechanistic. So we have a very strong research activity in neuroscience when people study the level of neuronal function in terms of nerve impulses, ionic channels, synapses, and that kind of exocytosis, those various kinds of familiar things in orthodox neuroscience. And a lot of people also hope that consciousness could somehow be understood as emerging from or being reducible to such processes at the neural level. And my intuitions, which sort of derive then from the study of physics, suggest that it seems unlikely to me that we will understand consciousness through the mechanistic way. Certainly there are many aspects of consciousness that are mechanistic. I mean, our visual experience produces, if you like, a virtual reality, to borrow this phrase, for example, my colleague Antti Revonsuo uses. We have a kind of virtual reality of objects that we experience, and they are objects that are outside of each other, and in that sense it is, if you like, the mechanical world that we also discovered in classical physics. But I think there's also something deeper to consciousness, and also some radically holistic features in consciousness, and there I think that certain intuitions and insights from contemporary physics can give us a framework to understand those.
If you're you're talking about you're saying the implicate order, and could you define that phrase? Like, why did they use the words implicate and order? I mean, what is the connotation of that phrase?
Right. It's again the best to understand in contrast with this mechanistic order. That in the mechanistic order, that something like we could use two different instruments to illustrate the two different orders. The photographic lens illustrates the mechanistic order very well, because what the lens does when you're taking a picture of the object, it will map each part of the object to a part in the photographic plate. So there's a sort of one-to-one correspondence, and that emphasizes very much that everything can be understood in terms of its parts. And even things we don't today see, we believe that in the future we might see them in such a way. Now there's another instrument, the hologram, which operates in a different order. And in the case of when you're taking a hologram of an object, information about the entire object will be contained in each part of the holographic plate. So in that sense, you have the whole contained in each part. And when you shine light on any region of the holographic plate, you will get an image of the entire object out of there. So Bohm called this, we could say that there are two processes. There's enfoldment and unfoldment. that the enfoldment is when you're recording it. So you could say that somehow the entire object, information about it, is enfolded everywhere in the holographic plate, because you can get it out wherever you put the laser beam. But when you get it out, then you're unfolding that entire image. So that's the key part of the implicate order, that you are.
But everything's implicated in everything else?
Well, in that sense, and this is, so we could, for example, we could say that this, when you, in the hologram, when I have a hologram of an apple, then you could say that the apple gets enfolded, the whole apple is enfolded all over in the holographic plate. And Bohm's suggestion was then that it works the same for elementary particles, that somehow now we have this thing that here's the apple and here's the hologram, and the entire apple is contained, information about the entire apple is contained at every single point of the hologram, right? Mm-hmm. Let's use that as a metaphor for the whole universe. Let's here say it's an elementary particle such as an electron, and let's say that here's a universe.
Okay.
So Bohm's idea, and he would claim that the laws of quantum mechanics would hint this, is that somehow, if you like, information about the entire electron is contained at every single point of the universe. So in that sense, each particle is enfolded to the whole universe. And then we know from this non-locality experiments in quantum mechanics, we also know that two space-like separated particles that have been together earlier enfold each other, so that in a sense that they seem really not to be that separate from each other. So if you like, we have two kinds of enfoldment. We have the enfoldment where each part is enfolded into the entire universe. So somehow, wherever you go, you would find it. And then we have a special kind of enfoldment you could call quantum entanglement that can prevail between individual particles.
What kind of metaphor would you use to describe what you're saying? Like if you had to use very simplistic, when we were talking earlier, you're saying, for instance, take an egg and you break it and you mix it into...
That's the way, it's a familiar word in English where we use the word enfolded or folded, that we say that when if we are baking an egg, then we're baking a cake, we take an egg.
The cake's enfolded in the egg and you bake the egg? No, okay.
No, it's when you put an egg to the dough, then you fold it, and then we say later on that an egg is folded into the cake. Mm-hmm. So that's a very simple metaphor of enfoldment. And now one trouble is that we can't get egg out of the cake because there has been what is known as irreversible diffusive mixing. Okay. But as another metaphor to illustrate the implicate order, Bohm, he was watching BBC television maybe sometime in the 70s, and he saw this device which consisted of two concentric cylinders, and in between the two cylinders there was glycerin, some very viscous medium, and then they were showing that you could put just a droplet of ink on top of the glycerin, and then you would just have a round droplet. It would be insoluble ink. If you then start turning the outer cylinder, the glycerin moves slightly and the droplet becomes a thread. So you actually have, it becomes a thread, you can see. If you keep turning the outer cylinder, it becomes invisible. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit like putting the egg into the dough.
Sure, okay.
Now, the difference is that if you, here in this device, if you turn back the other direction, you turn back the outer cylinder, you will first see a thread appearing, and if you keep on turning, you bring back, for all practical purposes, the same droplet. So this is a reversible process. And here again, Bohm would saying that this is a metaphor for this enfoldment process, where it disappears to the hole, if you like, and then the reverse unfoldment when you bring it back. And you see, let's consider the state where when we have put in the droplet and turned many times so that we see nothing. If we were to look at the mic, let's say that we put it blue droplet in there. If we keep turning, so we've been turning there, and now if we now look at the microscope into the state where it's not visible to the eye, we would see tiny little blue parts, because they're really carbon atoms that this droplet is made of, all over this glycerine. So that would be the enfolded state. And when we start turning back, then we would see those blue, gradually all those blue particles coming together to form the droplet, a kind of binding, if you like. This is a sort of thing that we also need for consciousness. And so that's
what do you mean by that? Why do we need this binding for consciousness?
Well, you see, we could take another example. Let's say when we are watching a motion picture. What happens there that we take in very images, discrete images, and the human brain usually it cannot resolve images if it can only resolve images that when the interval is roughly 1/10 of a second or larger.
Okay.
Now, so if you show this motion picture very slowly, people will see just a set of discrete images.
Okay.
But of course, a motion picture camera can have as many as 100 pictures within 1/10 of a second. Now, in such a situation, what happens is that the eye is taken in, or it's presented as input, these discrete images, sort of one by one. Now, we could now think these are a bit like the droplets that we drop to the glycerine tank. Okay, and the first picture, let's imagine that we are looking at the first frame. It comes to the retina of the eye, and then is carried over into the brain. That's a bit like enfolding that picture into the brain.
Okay.
Then we put the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. So at the level of the brain, we are putting as input these discrete elements, if you like, discrete frames, each slightly different from each other. In conscious experience, we will actually experience movement. So we don't, if you put them, if you make the interval between the images short enough, the output will be in our consciousness, and that is this sense of continuous movement. So this is a sort of a way where we have two levels. At the level of the brain, we have a number of elements that have been enfolded into the brain. At the level of consciousness, we have them unfolded, but not as discrete images, but as movement. So this was one of Bohm's suggestions, was that in general, when we experience movement in consciousness, underlying it is this, let's say in the brain we would have a number of distinct elements at different degrees of enfoldment, which it is a slightly difficult and sort of abstract idea, but it's basically, if you like, that is the mystery of consciousness. And you see the same would apply also when we are listening to music, because there we also, if we take some simple tone, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, now there were distinct notes that the brain took in. They got in there one by one, again a bit like those droplets, if you were putting droplets to the glycerine one after the other. And they were all enfolded in the sense that there's a spread of activity, that spreads into the brain. But in consciousness, we hear a melody. And again, we don't just hear, when we're listening to music, a musical melody, our experience is not only of one note at a time. Somehow we sense a whole temporally extended movement. We talk about the movement of a symphony. And there again, if you like, the reality in consciousness is this kind of experience of movement, tension between and harmony. Whereas at the level of the brain, in some sense, we have those distinct elements, the notes, that are first being enfolded, if you like, spread into the brain, but then the real mystery, how does that spread activity get bound together into what we experience in our consciousness?
Simple. Okay, well, it is very, very complex. Obviously, this is the thick of it, as it were, and you're in it right now. And do you have any conclusions that I mean, let's take it from a human point of view and say, what does this mean to me and the average viewer? And let's say that what you're saying is, okay, there's there's a dotted line, and if you move fast enough along it or further far enough away from it, it's a solid line. And then that solid line is nothing more than another dot and another larger dotted line, and you can kind of either go back or go faster and faster in either direction, or either way, you will gain more of a wholeness then, right? I mean, if for instance, if our consciousness was on the neutrino level or the photon level, we would experience the universe much more holistically than we do now, standing sort of on a little pebble in the middle of it, right? I mean, maybe not though as distinctly, right? I mean, like they say, neutrinos go right through the planet. Okay. They just fly right through, which means they don't necessarily see the planet, right? I mean, if they're going through it, there's nothing to bounce off. Meaning, you know, I mean, we have photons are bouncing off of something and they're creating a signal. But right. if they were going right, if we didn't have anything to reflect them, then we wouldn't experience them, right? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, if we're sitting if we're sitting here in the middle of this universe or infinity, what direction do we want to go and why? I mean, which direction is better? Is it better to go, some would say, reductionism, you know, taking the brain as a single unit and breaking it up into, you know, billion neurons, and then taking those and breaking each of those into a billion microtubules, or, you know, all the way down the line. That, in theory, that series could occur infinitely, right? I mean, we could just kind of keep going in that direction, or we could kind of meta up and you know, go like more of a psychological point of view of humans and human interactions, right. And then species interactions, and then solar system interactions, and galaxies interactions, and universes interactions, and kind of keep metaing, right. If that's a word, back that direction. Right. I mean, am I completely off the mark here, or does it seem?
See, I would say that if also if we go back to the question of sort of relevance, perhaps sort of relevance to us as human beings, so I would say there are two issues that are important. One of them is this issue of determinism and creativity, and the other one is the issue of wholeness. Because I think what is happening today in natural science is that that science encourages us to identify ourselves with our neural process, and those neural processes are conceived as mechanical, and the mechanical process is also very deterministic. So
what does that mean, deterministic?
Well, deterministic in the sense that the present moment is entirely determined by the state in the previous moment. That's the idea in classical physics and also in relativity.
Oh, causation. So basically, right. If I take a pool ball and hit another one and it bounces, the right. second one's bouncing because the first one hit it.
There's the idea of strict determinism that's somehow implicit in this, also I would say, in this contemporary neuroscience. And of course we have chaos theory and some developments there, but deep down there's a sense of mechanical determinism. And that's one very important area where quantum theory challenges that, because this famous uncertainty principle of quantum theory suggests that at least at the level of individual particles, we have currently no way of predicting, let's say, what an electron will do in the next moment. So in that sense, the future seems to be free from the past. The present moment doesn't entirely sort of determine the next moment. And if we use that, well, it may be so that those kind of processes also operate in our brains at some level. But even if we just use it as a metaphor, we could say that we could ask the question as human beings, how much are we identifying to our past, and how much do we let that determine what we will do in the future? In some sense, how much are we the prisoners of our own past? But also, I think if we keep on going with the way of mechanistic neuroscience, we will also identify with ourselves with some kind of machines, and that will tend to make us less free. So I think there's this issue of freedom that quantum theory clearly challenges the mainstream of Western science, which has been rather deterministic.
And what you're saying is that instead of putting all of our energy and our focus and our attention on trying to play on this level, that maybe we should move to these other. Is that even remotely? Like
well, I guess you see, it's good you mentioned that, you know, there's the term quantum mechanics, and Bohm wrote a textbook called Quantum Theory in '51, where he says that the term quantum mechanics is actually a misnomer, and it should really be called quantum non-mechanics. Why? Well, because of all these holistic features that I referred to, such as non-locality, the indivisibility of action and wave particle duality, and these very radically holistic features. And this is a very important message. I think it's good that you bring out this notion that science and physics is often, for many people, the same thing as machines, mechanical. And I think the strong message from especially quantum theory that this is not so. There are also very radically non-mechanical aspects in physics. So physics does not have to be mechanistic. Perhaps we want to have it that way because we want to make all kinds of applications, including weapons out of it and machines of mass destruction. But
or we want to predict what will happen when either we get hit by another,
right, sure,
or we hit another, or
sure.
I mean, we want to predict our action,
Right.
so that we can pick and choose what action we take, right?
Right.
I mean, to make it more.
No, certainly, I mean, there are those aspects of it, but it's sort of, I mean, in that sense, we often hope that science would sort of serve humanity, but it's not. I think we also should try to listen to, if you like, the message, what nature is trying to tell us through quantum mechanics. And what it's also telling us is it's not only about mechanical aspects and also, let's say, huge energies of destruction. There's also this more, if you like, aspects of interconnectedness and wholeness and in that sense, but also unpredictability, which really means that perhaps this is one of our basic fears is the fear of uncertainty, because we don't know what will happen in the future, and that's again you see, perhaps science, part of the scientific drive could be a drive for certainty, and that why it was such a shock when it was sort of discovered roughly 100 years ago, a bit later, around 1920s, it was discovered that this indeterminacy principle, that we are unable to predict. And for some people that means that nature deep down is indeterminate. That
It's chaotic.
Well, yes, it's sort of a somehow very, it's not predictable in that kind of a way that we might like it to be. But you see, that could be also turned about the other way around, that could also mean for us as human beings, and again, at least as a metaphor, that there's a possibility of a freedom from the past, that there's a possibility of creativity that could come in. But as long as we identify ourselves with the more, let's say, the more classical physics ideas, the more mechanistic metaphors, we are not going to tap into that creativity. And you see, and the other, so I think one of the important things that we get one of the important messages we get out of quantum theory is this idea of freedom, and the other one would be the idea of wholeness then. That again, that our typical conscious experience, there prevails wholeness. And it may be a mistake to try to explain that entirely in terms of some mechanical functioning of the brain. Again, we might be really not doing justice to the phenomena. And one thing quantum mechanics tells us is that the nature has these holistic, non-mechanical aspects in it, at least at the fundamental level of physics. Now, philosophers usually think, well, if something can happen at some level of nature, in principle it could happen at higher levels. And that would be like my research program, that I would promote that we should give attention to the nature of our conscious experience. We should acknowledge the various features, which ones are the mechanistic, which ones are the holistic. But there's no imperative coming from science that the holistic features should be reduced to mechanistic interaction. The alternative is to see them as somewhat similar to the quantum phenomena. Now, when you say things like this, people say, well, how about the brain? How does that work? I mean, how could you possibly have this? To make this at all plausible, then we should find these quantum phenomena having interesting effects in the human brain. And this has always been rejected by saying that the brain is too warm, it is too wet. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, where in particular the work of Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose and the other people that work with him comes in, because there's this currently a lot of increasing research on the role of the subneuronal or intraneuronal processes.
Microtubules.
Especially microtubules. Mm-hmm. And in this Tucson conference, we saw some very interesting results reporting how it seems that, again, for me, I'm not. It's not sort of my field, so it's a hobby for me, and it's an interesting hobby. What I understood is that water, which has previously been thought to destroy this so-called quantum coherence, the holistic state, can be a friend of coherence, and other similar things which seem to support the hypothesis of Hamarov. Now again, this has to be looked carefully by many scientists, but I would say that as far as I can judge, these results are very encouraging. That actually, you know, it seems more and more plausible that some of these coherent quantum states could actually survive and exist in the brain. And my idea, and there are various hypotheses about this. There's the Penrose-Hamarov hypothesis about consciousness somehow closely related to a kind of collapse of this quantum holistic state, the wave function. And there are alternative ways of looking at, like the bone theory, where you might, which hasn't been thought at all through so carefully as Hamarov and Penrose have done theirs. But I mean, in some sense, it doesn't matter. I mean, that will be a future question to see out which one of these quantum hypotheses would be correct. But I think one of the basic interesting ideas is that maybe the wholeness of our conscious experience could be in some sense grounded in these holistic physical phenomena in the intraneuronal or subneuronal level of the brain.
All right, so basically saying then that well, here's a question I have. I mean, our whole idea that the quantum level is interconnected, or we're interconnected through the quantum level, which, I mean, it's sort of like our roots go down and then they entangle down in the quantum level. But I mean, if we were, for instance, you know, a billion times smaller than a quark, I mean, wouldn't the quantum level be far more predictable to us? All those quantum things that we see flying around that look very unpredictable from this perspective, if we were far, far smaller than them, wouldn't they look more like planets and galaxies and solar systems and things?
Right, that's entirely possible, of course, there, because we cannot observe at that level. So that would be,
without
we can
somehow
always speculate, yeah, but we can always make those kinds of speculations and hypotheses. But one alternative, of course, that at some level, as we go deep enough, this whole scheme of, let's say, particles moving along trajectories will break down, and we come into something else, perhaps some kind of field transformations or some other kind of process. So it's not that, perhaps it's more something we could call as a movement or process rather than as an entity that we would find as we go deeper into the structure.
A movement or a process, but again, isn't the movement and process simply our perspective on I mean, if you went far enough back from this planet and watched all the activity on it, it would look like a movement or a process, right? When in fact, from our perspective, it's, you know, individual component pieces and things moving around. And
yeah, but it would seem that I mean, that of course works, that when we start, let's say, from the level of the human organism and we go deeper into cells, that we always tend to find at the lower level elements in interaction. But I mean, there's no reason why that should go on forever. I mean, it's also at least logically possible that you come up to a point where that doesn't work. And I think even physics suggests that, you see, for example, in the quantum field theory, that you know, for example, if there's this vacuum state which can be a source of the particles. I mean, there's sort of, it doesn't seem to be very, you know, necessary to assume that you should also find elements there. See, that could be the sort of the mechanistic thinking habits that we have, that, and one would say that the lens has made us believe that however deep we go, we will always find parts. But maybe, you know, that could be the philosophy of wholeness. But perhaps the whole is the kind of the primary ground, and out of which particles emerge as sort of some kind of approximate structures.
I get you. So basically, I'm making a circular argument. If we go further and further, if we're able to somehow break ourselves into, you know, finer and finer and finer particles, for instance, like a boulder into dust, for instance.
Right.
I mean, the same amount of material is there, but its properties are far different. But even at that point, you're saying no matter, even if it is infinite, or especially if it is infinite, that series, there will always be a wholeness or a oneness beneath us or beyond us or around us that will always be a wholeness or a oneness. So it doesn't matter how far we go that direction or that direction, we're always going to be surrounded by a oneness or a wholeness, right? And so what you're saying is, I I mean, am I?
Right. The other way, just if we think about concreteness, that we shouldn't think that, let's say, electrons are little rocks, because if you take an electron and a positron and put them together, you will get radiation. If you like, the matter will disappear.
Right. Okay.
So, and that you could then think of more as a movement in a field.
Are we sure that that's not like taking two marbles and throwing them together really, really hard so that they just shatter into dust that's so fine we can't see it?
Okay. Well, that would be another way of thinking about it. But again, it's beyond my
Right.
competence to answer.
Well, I mean, I agree that there'll always be we'll always have even if we did determine how to mechanically manipulate, control, or predict what we perceive as the quantum level right now, or what we're calling the quantum level. I mean, even if we did and we were able to basically subsist, and there'll be another quantum, so we'll always have a sort of unified field that is whole and unpredictable, right there next to us, or right below or beneath, or wherever we can say the quantum field exists. I mean, so what you're saying is we should, instead of focusing on or just focusing on the sphere that we are in, where we can predict individual objects or particles or people or whatever, we should maybe go 50-50 with that and the one field.
But perhaps more, you see, more specifically, if you look in conscious experience, so we could say also that consciousness has sort of depth. That in the normal state of consciousness, then in our visual experience, for example, we have a kind of space-time. Now, the space-time we see is probably not the actual space-time. It's something that the brain creates. It's a kind of virtual reality. And then we have objects in that space-time. But then, and that sort of can be seen as rather mechanical. It's a bit like the Newtonian mechanics being played in our virtual reality. But what's important is that consciousness has also a deeper structure into it, out of which this the space-time we experience is being projected, and so that suggests again a kind of that would be a kind of an implicate order, that we could say that even in somehow the space-time we experience is enfolded in the brain, and it's unfolded constantly, so that we have it.
So there's a continuity,
right?
there.
And what we tend to do is we tend to assume that the space-time we experience is the space-time out there in the world. But I mean, a lot of evidence suggests that it's more like an inner show or a construction.
Okay.
Now, but I think again that, but I think within consciousness studies we should also pay attention to the deeper levels of consciousness, out of which this, if you like, the virtual reality is being projected, and also to the possibility of creativity. So I mean, I would say there are those sort of two things. It's the wholeness of conscious experience, but also the possibility of creativity that we should be giving attention to. And that I would say that, and also which leads to the question of intelligence. And I would say that somewhat the current trend in cognitive neuroscience tends rather to emphasize trying to understand conscious experience in terms of mechanical parts interaction, where the underlying processes can be rather deterministic. So this is again a work of Roger Penrose, to say that to understand intelligence we have to go beyond what he calls mechanistic computability. But there has to be some kind of non-computable physical process. And that's again where the Penrose-Hameroff hypothesis would come in, because they are suggesting that in the microtubules certain non-computable quantum processes would be taking place. And they could be more associated with true intelligence, rather than some kind of mechanical problem solving or mechanical calculation of computable functions. So that way if one would want to say that what the consciousness studies is pointing to is the what we should really acknowledge is the holistic features of conscious experience, but also, if you like, the unpredictability, possibility of freedom, and then also the possibility of sort of what we might call creative intelligence. And as long as we identify ourselves with a mechanical past, that will prevent us. And in that, I also feel that in that sense, natural science could actually, even the consciousness studies, could actually just be a, if you like, limiting factor for human creativity and if you like, realizing human potentiality. And I feel that in one of the, if you like, the implications of the quantum approaches is that we give more room to those very important aspects of human experience.
Just as mean, considering that we've been around for 100,000 years talking about this exact same subject, why are we still discussing it if it would have been as easy as, because the holistic viewpoint, in theory, has been around, and people have you know, been able to attain states, even just in general, of you know, a holistic perspective versus the component parts. But why are we still sitting here trying to solve? It's almost like we're trying to solve something, and why are we doing that? Is that because we're not free right now, or we feel not free of something, or I mean, just wondering, is it as simple as saying if we you know, just throw science and everything out the window and just be content with a holism of the universe and us in it, and that's it? Or okay, but we might get a little bored of that after a little while, and we might want to, like, you know, start to look at components again, and I mean, so are you saying, are you being mutually exclusive, saying we should just look at things holistically, or that, or both at the same time?
I think we should try to look at the things as much as possible as they are. I mean, because you could say that the spirit of the scientific attitude is to acknowledge the facts, whether we like them or not. So I would say that in conscious experience we find certain amount of mechanistic evidence that you know, we are mechanistic, and of course our bodies are macroscopic entities and there are mechanistic features of them. But then there's also the evidence that there are holistic features. I think somehow as scientists then we should acknowledge both of those facts and try to explain them in a way that does justice to the facts, sort of doesn't just explain them away or put them under the carpet like I think a lot of modern mechanistic science does. So, and the other thing is, of course, that maybe in the old days it was just enough to meditate and sort of try to get to the nirvana or whatever. But of course, these days we have the problem that the Western science has sort of originated and created this tremendous technology, and that really puts heavy demands on us who use it. So in some sense,
we're
it seems that we don't have the intelligence currently. I mean, if we look at the political situation or ecological or economic and so on, I mean, all kinds of problems that we still have. I mean, it seems quite clear that we are, you know, our consciousness is not yet able to handle the technology. And in some sense, as we go, what we're doing today to just develop more and more of this technology and not developing the understanding of our consciousness and ourselves, it's very dangerous, because it's like giving a nuclear bomb to some children to play, or who can, or somehow who don't really know what they're doing. I mean, this is another feature where I think consciousness studies is not only to try kind of a scientific, disinterested study of consciousness. I think that we've actually understood better the way the mind works. We might also understand better, let's say, why people can't cooperate with each other, or why somehow, you know, I mean, let's say we have a lot of religious conflict. So religion is the most important thing to people, that, you know, it's all important, but somehow then, you know, if you have people with two different belief systems, they're ready to kill each other just because they hold that's so important. Now, holding the religion important is an act of consciousness, and we should start asking why are certain things so important to us that we are ready to destroy everything just to hold on to those kinds of things. And so, of course, in some sense this is standard psychology, but I also feel that if we start understanding consciousness, both, if you like, how the past determines what we do and the mechanical aspects of ourselves, but also the possibility of having if you like, a creative insight or intelligent perception to our conditioning, then in that sense there might be a different way of trying to approach these problems. I mean, what we're doing now is just sort of negotiating and trying to force things to happen, but like, let's say in politics, we very rarely start really fundamentally challenging the sort of assumptions that really are causing all the problems. And that, I would say, it's an aspect of our consciousness.
Okay. All right. Well, summing up, where would you say, where are you going to apply your focus? I mean, over the next few years, for instance, like what's exciting you right now? And the political situation, for instance, you're one man,
right?
And you can either, you know, run for president, or from a scientific point of view, or a philosopher's point of view, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, that's just, I guess that's just one of the implications. I mean, I haven't focused on that so much. But I guess then when things sort of seem to go wrong, then one feels that that we should start asking some of those questions, like why do we hold, why are we happy to destroy everything just because of certain belief systems that we have, and what maybe we should, go back, start again. I mean, after the Cold War, maybe there was a little bit of a feeling that things are getting better, but right now it seems that we're back into same troubles. But in a more scientific way, my interest is right now. I'm interested in understanding time consciousness, and how this sort of implicate order would be able to explain, let's say, our experience when we are listening to music, and those sorts of things. And at the same time, basically, just I'm interested to see how this the various things about conscious experience, whether we can also have a better understanding them, where, if you like, the more traditional approaches and then the more radical approaches, sort of quantum approaches like that of Hameroff's, whether they could somehow be bridged together and make a better theory out of it.